Good evening. Welcome again to Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott. And tonight we'll be talking about a skill that may seem like it's beginning to disappear in modern America. We'll be talking about writing, the teaching of writing, why writing is important, and how to do it well. Our guest tonight is Marion Ivey of the Illinois Writing Project. Marion, welcome to the show. It's so nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with some of the basics. What is the Illinois Writing Project?
The Illinois Writing Project is an organization geared toward providing professional development for teachers to help support the teaching of writing for students of all ages and from every content area.
And why is that hard? I mean, aren't teachers already trained in how to teach? And isn't writing a pretty basic skill that everyone learned when they were 5?
It is and it isn't. I think there are things that you can do at any stage in your life to improve your practice, to get better at it. And teachers are constantly looking for ways to improve their instruction. And so this just gives teachers the support that they're looking for in developing and improving their writing instruction and functions of their writing workshop within their classrooms.
So when we talk about writing, I think it's useful to know what we mean when we say that. So we're not just talking about being able to put a sentence down on paper, right? I mean, writing is a much more complex skill than that, right?
That's true, it is. And I think that it's important to note that you use different types of writing for different audiences, and being able to cater your writing so that it appeals to different audiences is an important skill.
So I have done a number of writing assignments myself for the corporate world, for presentation, for music, and all sorts of different things. But writing in general must, no matter what your audience is, must have certain commonalities, right? So what are some of the common things about writing that would be taught that you would, as a teacher, and I should point out to our audience that you yourself are a teacher.
That's
so
true.
What would be some of those important commonalities in writing, no matter what the type or the audience or the subject?
Certainly. I would say probably the phases in your writing would include drafting and editing and revising and hopefully eventually publishing your writing so that you're able to share it with an audience. And one of the things, as I mentioned, to keep in mind as you're drafting is bearing in mind what audience you're going to prepare this writing for. And so there's,
So why is that so important?
I think that the type of writing that you do varies depending on who's going to be receiving it. If you're writing a personal letter, it's going to be much more personal and informal than, say, if you're writing an essay for school or informative writing that is to inform your audience, share information. So depending on the intended audience, you want to make sure that you're catering to that audience, and your voice will change. Your voice will be different.
And we're not talking about a physical voice. I'm not going to lower my voice or raise my voice, right? We're talking about the voice that comes through your writing.
That's correct, the voice of your piece.
So talk a little bit about that. I mean, we hear that a lot, the voice of the writing. What does that mean? I mean, how does one develop a voice for writing, and how might it look different?
Well, one of the things that I've learned a lot as part of the training that I went through with the Illinois Writing Project was about using mentor texts. Good writers read a lot of books, and you figure out what kinds of writing you like, and you're able to sort of initially model your writing after a mentor text or a piece of writing that you think does a really good job of not necessarily the type of message, but the way that it's expressed. And you're able to use some of the tools that the author used for those pieces, and you can borrow from a few different authors and find something that really fits you until you find the voice that you want for that specific piece.
So you can start out trying to emulate Faulkner, right?
Well,
and then realize that no one understands you.
Right.
So you have to find something different.
Right,
Yeah.
but definitely when we're writing, we use different mentor texts. A lot of really good picture books, even with older children, use really good tools or structures in the way the writing is put together, and it just kind of makes it easy for students to see how you can follow this sort of a format or this sort of pattern that would be beneficial in putting your writing together?
So when I think about writing, and as I say, I've written a lot of different things in the course of my life. I remember in school being trained to do an outline, which I always hated and thought was ridiculous. But now, as an adult, of course, with many years of hindsight and experience, although I still don't really write outlines, I do at least have a sense of what's the structure. And I write a lot of things for business, and so I have to make an argument, essentially. I'm writing what would be argumentative pieces.
Certainly.
You know, here's something I want to see done, and here's why this makes sense. So that's a type of thinking.
Sure.
And how does writing then, and writing instruction, address that element of the thought process?
Well, I would say that there are basically three forms of writing. There's a narrative, which would be like a personal story. There's informative writing, where you're giving information. And there's argument writing. And the structures are slightly different for all of them. But it's important that when you're writing an argument, that you're trying to persuade or sway your audience over to your way of thinking, so to speak. And so you need to include some points of view and then some support for those things. And evidence is really, really key in showing why your way is better. Or
Except in our current post-truth environment where evidence doesn't seem to matter much. But I make light of it. But there is evidence, but what I would think about as well is the emotional content. And even in some, like I know from my own perspective, if I'm writing even a dry piece like a request for proposal, there's a story that has to be told. What's the problem? And it has to be described in a way that people understand.
Certainly.
Tell me what your solution is. So is that part of what you're talking about as well, that the story, no matter what type of writing it is?
Yes, definitely. I think that you need to include some background information about why this topic is important to you. One of the things that we've done we did last year a writing palooza, which was a really nice celebration of writing for students. And one of the types of writing that we included was soapbox speeches, and getting kids involved in civic writing about causes that are important to them. And it's certainly, when you bring some passion and personal interest, your writing is better. It's something that is important to you, and your passion shows through in your writing. But you have to be able to explain why it's important to you. You have to tell, as you say, your story, why this is something that's significant to you. And it was an incredible experience. It was held in one of the schools in Chicago, and afterwards our publishing was students got to come forward and share their writing with the audience at large, and every child, well, not quite every child, but most of them wanted to speak, and it was really powerful.
What was the age range of the children?
From kindergarten through, I think, 8th grade. Yeah, so maybe it was even 12th. And there were some guest speakers who came and delivered some of the what's the word I'm looking for? Some of the sessions with the students.
This would be verbal writer's block? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. But some of the sessions were done with guest speakers, and it was just really incredible, the variety of things that were offered for students.
So what got you involved in the writing project? Why are you doing it yourself?
I want to say 2000, around 2000. No, that wasn't quite right. At any rate, earlier, maybe 2004, I attended a summer leadership institute, which was held that year in Oak Park. And it was a variety of teachers from many different grade levels. I personally teach kindergarten, but there were teachers of high school and all the way through to high school. And we did some literature circles where you do book discussions, and I developed this incredible list of books that I wanted to read and then write about. And we did modeling of what your classroom might function like in a reading writing workshop. And it was just an incredible experience, and I was so inspired that I just got more and more
Jumped
connected.
in,
Yeah,
both feet.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think, you know, there are a few people who are so inspired to join the writing project when they participate in the summer leadership, but a lot of people take the course. It was 6-week course, I think, over the summer, and a lot of people will spread the word and, you know, recommend friends, and, you know, you tell everyone you know, and other people will come as a result of you having attended. I don't know anyone who's ever had anything negative to say about the experience.
So what did you take away that helps you? I mean, kindergarten, I would think the kindergartners are not writing extensive essays or long pieces.
They're not.
But what do you take into the classroom for kindergarten?
Oh, quite a bit. One of the things is just being willing to take risks. The idea that
With you as a teacher taking risks, or
oh,
asking the kids to
absolutely.
take risks, or both?
Asking the students to take risks, but I think as a teacher leader, part of that is taking risks yourself. Being willing to be the first one and risking publicly making a mistake, and really demonstrating for kids that making a mistake is okay, that that's the way we learn. But for students in kindergarten, the biggest thing is, you know, when they enter kindergarten, they all say, I don't know how to write, and I don't know how to read, but they can, they do have ideas, and helping them to realize that, you know, the goal is to get their writing, their ideas, their thoughts down on paper, either through illustrations or for words. And in the beginning, we start out with a lot of illustrations. We go from there to some dictation, and from there to using some invented spelling with kindergarten.
Invented spelling?
Invented spelling, where basically they capture all of the sounds that they hear when they say a word in their writing. And so, you know, initially that might just be the first sound in a word. Sometimes it's, you know, at the very beginning of just a random string of letters, and that's their writing, and it means something to them. They tell you what it means, and you write it down in more traditional spelling.
Right, right.
But also just getting them to be willing to take some risks and write down the sounds that they hear. There is no wrong way to spell it. It's more important that they get their ideas captured than it is this, because this isn't spelling, this is writing.
But since eventually there will be a right way to spell it, when does that happen?
Later. The only
After
words,
kindergarten, or?
for the most part, yes. The only words that I actually hold them accountable for are sight words, which are high frequency words that they're going to see over and over again in the words that they read.
Like stop on a stop sign, or?
Like a, and I, and the, and like, and can, and we. There's about 31 that I hold them accountable for in kindergarten. It's part of the Common Core State Standards that they begin to recognize high frequency words, and those 31 have been identified in the district where I teach as the ones that they should know by the end of kindergarten.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so those are the ones that I hold them accountable for. They're posted in our classroom. They don't have to memorize them. They have tools that they can use to find out how to spell them. There's the environment, the classroom is very print rich, and so there are lots of resources and tools that they can use to access words or sounds that they aren't sure how to spell. So I help them become fluent with using those tools, knowing which tools to go to for what, that kind of thing.
So what are they capable of at the end of the year? I mean, can they write a sentence?
2 to 3 sentences on a single topic with a related illustration.
And you have them do the illustration as well, or they pick it out of a, they draw it?
They would do the illustrations, yeah. Not all authors are also illustrators, but in kindergarten we are.
They all are.
Yes,
Right.
that's right.
Well, you know, there's a theory, I'm sure you know, there's a theory about art that we're all born as artists. It's just that some people pursue it and develop those synapses,
Absolutely.
and others don't.
Yes.
But everyone has that option at the very early age.
Well, and I think it has also a lot to do with, you know, your mindset. There are people who turn off certain things when they think they're not good at it, and there are others who persist until they are. So that's another thing that I think writers do, is they persist.
Oh.
They work at things and they hone their craft and work at getting better at it.
And we joked a little earlier about writer's block, and every writer has it.
Yes,
Right?
absolutely.
So, you point out persistence. If you let the first writer's block defeat you, well, you're not a writer.
That's true.
Right.
That's very true.
So let's talk a little bit about how writing is changing in the modern world. I mean, we have social media, we have Twitter, we have all sorts of shortened ways. We have emoticons, emojis, and all of this may be changing the way we communicate in writing to each other. So how does that filter down to the level where you're teaching?
It's interesting. In some ways, I think people are writing more. I think people spend an exorbitant amount of time on social media. And a lot of that does include some writing. It's much less formal, I think, than...
Well, in abbreviation, also,
Tradition.
instead of writing out the word Y-O-U for
Yes.
you, it's just a letter.
Yes.
Are you coming? The letter R. You
You.
see all this stuff, right?
Yes.
Does that change the way we think about writing? And if so, is that good or bad? Or either?
I don't know that it's good or bad. I mean, I think there are people who think that anything different from what they're accustomed to is bad.
The way I learned was exactly correct.
Right.
Anything else is an aberration, right?
I think it's sort of an evolution. I don't know if it's necessarily in the right direction, but I do think that there are things that come out of it, advancements that come out of social change in general. We don't yet know fully what they'll be. I think that people are certainly communicating. In some ways, I feel like it's less productive. Everybody feels like their opinion
is the most important.
Is the most important opinion.
That's true for no one except me, of course.
Well,
I'll make the exception for me.
I think it's funny because we think about it generationally, and we think about younger generations as being more personally fixated. And I think it's just different. I think they are more outward about it, more expressive about it. They don't have the reservations about kind of putting it out there. But I don't know that they're any more self-involved.
It will come back to haunt them when they run for public office 30 years later.
Certainly, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So do you, one of the things one of the criticisms I hear about, generally aimed at social media because the communication is so short and abbreviated, that the idea of writing as a complex and constructed whole gets lost. And the idea of, when we were talking about argumentative writing earlier,
Sure.
the idea of being able to construct a narrative that says, here's where I'm going to start, and I'm going to lead you through these sequence of events and get you to a conclusion that I'm hoping you'll reach with me, that becomes lost in this rapid-fire texting or social media-based writing. Is that something you think about? Is that just me as an old guy having
No, I
paranoid
would certainly agree
fears?
that the abbreviated and less formal communication definitely leaves some things lost in the translation. But I think also society's less patient. And it's interesting in things that I've published, you know, after like 3 paragraphs, people stop reading. No matter how developed your argument is, if it's on social media, people aren't there for an extended argument.
Right.
You have to be able to kind of condense it and make it very succinct in order to be able to communicate the full weight of your argument.
So does that change the way you think about teaching writing?
I think that you think in terms of making your writing efficient and succinct, and including all of the pertinent information. You think about the word choice that you use, choosing the words that are best going to communicate your message. You think about the structures that you use in your writing that are going to get your message across, and in such a way that it is reader friendly. That's one of the things that even with my kindergartners, we talk about how there are things that you need to think about to make sure that your writing is easy for your reader to follow. Little conventions like making sure you have spaces between your words.
Yes.
In kindergarten,
You've sure, yes, that's not obvious yet.
yeah,
Right.
and that your ideas end with some punctuation so that the reader knows that that's the end of this idea and you're going to start another. I mean, so there are certain, like even in kindergarten, certain writing conventions that you're going to focus on, and they change and develop as students get older.
It's actually something I've seen in texting, which, by the way, I find to be an incredibly useful tool. but it's short, and you need to be succinct, as you say. But punctuation seems to go by the wayside in texting. Even things like the possessive, apostrophe S, that seems to have disappeared.
Yes.
So you see that it's very punctuation light.
Well, and tweeting, where you're limited by the number of characters that you can use, you have to get really frugal. And so punctuation is an easy thing. Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Sort of like haiku poetry.
Yes.
How do you say it in the most succinct and direct manner?
Number of syllables, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things I also read about, the changes in modern culture is that students or people generally don't read books the way that they did. And the idea of sitting down with a book that might take you a week or two or three to finish. You talked about the lack of attention span, the impatience. That, to my mind, changes the way we think, generally. Because being able to follow a long discussion, or even just a novel, follow the plot of a story.
Certainly.
Takes a certain cognitive process, whereas this short episodic reading is a very different cognitive process. How does that affect, in your opinion, how does that affect us as a society or as thinkers or as people interacting with each other? Do you think that there's some change, or is the lack of attention that you were talking about earlier a cause or effect of what we're seeing here in social media?
It's hard to say, which is the cause and which is the effect. But I would say that in general, good writers are readers. It's hard to get there without reading
a lot.
Yeah, and having lots of exposure to different kinds of texts and getting excited about books. And I think one of the things that teachers can do that really, really drives student interest in writing is introduce them to really good literature. And it's, there's good new literature, but there's also really good old literature, old standbys that you remember from your childhood, and you introduce them to your students and get them excited about it. And
well, we can go all the way back to the Iliad and the Odyssey. There's good literature from thousands of years ago.
Absolutely, absolutely.
One of the other things I think about writing is it can teach you how to organize your thoughts, which in really any setting, and I think I've taught business students, graduate business students. We talk sometimes about communication and how do you get things done in a corporation. And one of the ideas that I try to stress is you have to be organized in your own thinking. And so in my experience, writing helps you do that. It helps you organize your thinking.
Absolutely. One of the rudimentary forms of writing is like list making. And that can be, things that you need or things that you want to make sure that you don't forget to include in your writing. You can start with an outline format, sort of with a list of the things that you want to include, and then expound on it. One of the things that we've done with kindergarten students is they make a list, and then they turn each word into a sentence, and that becomes the beginning of a paragraph. So just kind of...
and does it actually work? I mean,
it does, yeah.
Right. They can turn a list into some sort of narrative?
They can turn a list into some sort of, well, it can be a narrative or it can be informational. It doesn't matter. It will work either way, but they're always surprised the first time. They've created this page of writing when they think that they don't know how to write. So, and then once you show them that they can, they're willing to try again.
Now, kindergarten's a little early, but do you ever talk about why these are important life skills? Does that come up, why being able to write is going to be useful forever?
Well, it is useful forever. It's also being taught a lot in like the upper grades with one of the goals is, you know, argument writing, honestly, and how that's useful in your work. As an adult, pretty much anything you do, you have to be able to
Sell your
make
idea.
a case for anything.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
make the case.
Make a case for yourself, even to find employment. So, you know, those are skills that are going to come in handy over and over again in your life.
So how has this made you, the writing project, coming back to the original discussion here,
Certainly.
How has this made you a better teacher?
I think it's given me sort of a framework for my writing workshop, and being able to support my students better, being able to celebrate their work better. I think I always, it's possible that I went into teaching because I love children's literature so much. And, you know, this way I get to read books with kids all day long.
Right,
yeah, exactly. So I've always had that sort of passion, and being able to introduce the books that I love to children, even new ones that are coming out, but then being able to turn that around to, you know, kinds of writing that we could do together.
Does Dr. Seuss come up, or is that too sophisticated?
So it's interesting. Dr. Seuss wrote books that included all sight words and nonsense words, which are coming in handy as we assess students' ability to decode words that they've never seen before. Dr. Seuss was very good at nonsense. So it's
he was actually a very good visual artist as well.
Yes, that is true. That is true. And one of the things that Dr. Seuss books do is they're fairly substantial for a beginning reader. If a child can get through, and for a lot of kids, Hop on Pop is a good first starting book. It builds confidence. It's filled with sight words that they are going to come across over and over again in all kinds of books.
And these are like these 31 words that you've
Yes,
talked about?
yes, they're probably a little more than 31. I think they gave him a list of like 100 words and said make a book and use only these words.
Wow.
And
talk about a tough writing assignment.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. And so the other words that are not high frequency words or sight words are all nonsense words that he made up. And it kind of gave him the license to make things rhyme, even though they didn't necessarily make sense.
But intriguingly, they do make sense. And the nonsense words, well, actually, I think about a different approach to nonsense, but the poem Jabberwocky, which is all about nonsense words, and yet you can read it and really get a sense that you know what's going on here.
Yes. Yes, it's true. And I think that the tool that I use Dr. Seuss for is just empowering kids in being able to try reading independently. You can read them with kids. I can't say it's all the best literature. There are definitely some wonderful messages. One of my favorites is The Star-Bellied Sneetch.
Can't bring that one to mind, but
so I think
I'll have to go back to kindergarten.
You
apparently,
please do. Yes, I think it's about racism. So you know, I think it's a great book, but it's sort of like an underlying message.
Oh, way to kind of sneak it in there.
Sneak it in there, exactly.
Recognize
yes.
it, yeah.
Yes, because the best sneetches on the beaches have stars upon theirs. So there's like the.
But if you don't have stars, you're not one. Okay.
Exactly.
Yes,
Exactly. You should read it. It's a good book.
It reminds me of the phrase, everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten.
Learned in kindergarten, that's right. Wait your turn. Hold hands when you cross the street.
Yeah, very important things.
That's right.
Well, on that note, believe it or not, we're out of time already.
Wow.
So Dr. Seuss has taken us to a fitting conclusion, right? All right, so Marion, I want to thank you for your time. It's been wonderfully enjoyable, and I hope you'll come back sometime.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
So thank you for joining us once again on Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott, and we've been visiting with Marion Ivey, who's told us all about how to read in kindergarten, something we can all benefit from, even especially me. So you can catch us every Saturday night on Comcast Channel 19 at 8 o'clock, or you can see us on the web at publicperspective.tv. So till next time, thank you and good night. Okay, so.